I remember saying the same thing after reviewing Kena Bridge of Spirits. Just because you're a fresh-faced up-and-coming indie developer releasing your debut game, it doesn't grant you a free pass from criticism, and while I probably am a glass-half-full type of reviewer just because I love games, sue me, I've been known to stick the boot in if needed.
Are you kidding me? Oh my God, this is awful. I'm not even joking. Who made that?
Us? It's beautiful.
You made it? Give me my money back.
No, you can't.
I want my dollar back.
And just like Kena Bridge of Spirits, developers Awaceb have released their debut indie title, Tchia, and it surprised the hell out of me. It surprised me for very different reasons than Kena did though, because Kena refined their combat mechanics to an impressively polished standard, whereas Tchia has so many variations of mechanics instead. I had a similar sense of joy to when I played It Takes Two, albeit Tchia is a single player open world exploration game. That constant surprise of something new was always just around the corner, and mechanically feeling totally different from the last thing that I did. It's refreshing. I usually try to avoid comparing games to other games, and while there are mechanics that might seem familiar, like the gliding and tactical climbing accompanied by a stamina gauge, i.e. Zelda Breath of the Wild, there are elements to the gameplay that feel innovative, like the ability to soul jump and warp into 38 different variations of animals, or the ability to catapult yourself from tree to tree. The animals that Tchia can soul jump into each control differently, while some of what the animals can do doesn't exactly progress the game, and I'm not afraid to admit I spent a good hour raining a barrage of bird poo down from the sky onto innocent pedestrians. Soul jumping into the right animal for your specific needs quickly became a fun and authentic experience. One of the early quests had me searching for an egg, but why bother looking for shops or some nest when you can not only head straight to the source, you can become the source and plop eggs out at will. You might spot a glistening treasure or collectible at the peak of a mountain. Why walk up there when you could just fly? You might need to gather a precious pearl or two from the ocean's depths, but who needs oxygen or swimming lessons for that matter when you can just become one of the many streamlined sea creatures? Simply navigating this stunning world just brought me so much happiness, seamlessly combining all of Tchia's abilities from simply running, jumping and gliding off a cliff edge to then bolt into the body of a nearby bird while mid-flight, and just before my soul meter runs out, I'd gracefully land on a treetop and start launching myself from tree to tree, all the while my soul meter is filling back up again so I can find the next animal and quickly repeat that same process. But it's not just the animals that Tchia can become one with though, objects as well, and though there's not as many traversal benefits as animals, there are other benefits during the odd quest, and in particular the combat scenarios. Tchia is a much more exploration-focused game than a combat-focused game, but the combat encounters you'll face, those too have an authenticity about them. You can just aim your slingshot and shoot rocks doing minimal damage, but the fast-paced fluidity comes from soul jumping into the objects that can explode like lanterns and canisters. Tchia can dart across the ground into these objects, and with a generous slow-motioned arc she can aim at these spiritual fabric-like enemies called the Mano, and by launching the item at them she'll not only one-shot them, but she'll dispossess the item and Tchia will be left standing from where you fired, keeping your distance. If you make use of the explosive items dotted around and even keep a few stocked in your inventory to drop, you can make pretty light work of every encounter, but don't let that detract from the speed and fluidity of the combat. If you start slowing down, you'll soon find yourself entangled by the Mano's fabric, and later into the game you'll start dealing with bigger numbers in these fortresses with these sentinels that fire missiles and piles of fabric that'll spawn even more Mano if you don't ignite them quick enough. Combat certainly isn't the focus to the game, but it's still a more than decent and authentic experience nonetheless. Exploring is a treat, mainly thanks to the methods of traversal that I've already mentioned, but I liked that I had to place pins on a map, and just like a real map really, there's no "you are here" symbol. Tchia can vaguely highlight the region she's in, but by placing a pin and using that pin on your compass to navigate was another refreshing change from plonking huge waypoints on the HUD or having some GPS line to follow. The same with the treasures and the collectibles. There's an inviting faint glisten that can be seen off in the distance, and I appreciate this subtlety instead of some huge artificial looking waypoint or the dated methods of littering the map with question marks. The variations of mechanics don't just stop there though. Tchia has to manually adjust her sail to increase or decrease speed, as well as dropping the anchor to her handy raft that can sail between the islands. You could find yourself carving the bark off a small log, transforming it into a specific specific facial pattern, and doing it correctly will unlock the various totem shrines. Inside these shrines you'll find various challenges to complete, and doing so will see Tchia rewarded with a soul fruit, increasing her soul meter. You could be taking photos of this bustling, vibrant world, but it requires the old school method of a dark room film development. You might find a rock balancing minigame to enjoy, or you could even find a shooting range or a diving board to hurl yourself off and be graded on your mid-air flamboyancy. There's just so much to do. There's a huge emphasis on music throughout Tchia as well, and those that might have a soft spot for a Disney score, in particular The Lion King, will adore this soundtrack. I was expecting Elton John to just burst out from a bush at any moment while I'm rather uncomfortably getting my jam on with the local tribe. These musical moments are aesthetically similar to the few moments where Ellie whips a guitar out in The Last of Us, except it's far more frequent and focused on the player's timing as the prompts fly in towards the correct note. They become pretty challenging if you're looking to 100% these activities, and you'll even be rewarded with new abilities when doing so, where Tchia, for example, might be able to spawn a certain item or change the weather after playing the new melody that she's unlocked. The story starts off with a typical day for Tchia on her home island, one of the many sun-soaked reefs within a sprawling archipelago. At face value, I was expecting a flavour of Disney's modern-day, child-friendly narratives before things turned pretty dark. Tchia's father is kidnapped by some machete-wielding goon of the Miovora being a strange mythical worm-like god creature who rules over the archipelago and eats babies in the process.
That escalated quickly.
Tchia's adventure starts here, and albeit the majority of the quests are your basic fetch quests, the use of the aforementioned mechanics are brilliantly interwoven into these quests, making the fetch that much more enjoyable. The game is obviously fiction, but is based on a very real place I never knew it existed, that being New Caledonia, a French-speaking archipelago just off the east coast of Australia. New Caledonia is the homeland of the developers, and there's a clear outpouring of love for their homeland ingrained in Tchia, and it was insightful learning the little snippets of their culture. I suffered with minimal performance issues, mainly when sailing between islands. There was the occasional stutter due to shader compilations loading in, but that was about it. To run it on max settings at 4K with a 3090 and i9 and 32 gigs of RAM, I did need to make use of DLSS at quality setting to achieve a solid 60 FPS, quite far above 60 FPS in fact, but it ran smoothly and looked stunning in the process. I suffered with a traversal bug twice during my entire playthrough where Tchia would just get stuck climbing a ledge, but other than that, a pretty flawless experience bugs and performance wise. Tchia is out now and currently exclusive to Epic Games at around £23 and the PS5 at around £25, but the developers have hinted at expanding to Xbox and Switch in a recent tweet, so stay tuned for that one. Tchia surprised me, pleasantly surprised I should add as well, because maybe debut releases like Tchia and Kena are setting the bar incredibly high for other indie developers, but these authentically and refreshingly developed titles are starting to put some other AAA games to shame with the passion, the devotion and artistic talent clearly shining through in the end product. If you've played Tchia or plan to play, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the game, and I'll see you in the next one.